hope you can see this, and I look forward to us learning together. So, Erev Tov, good evening. We're in the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, and it is Erev Shabbat Shuva, and this weekend will be also going to synagogue on Sunday night for Yom Kippur. So obviously there's a lot of things going on. And in this shiur, what I want to do is share some beautiful ideas relating to Parshat Ha'azinu with an emphasis on Teshuvah, because it's Shabbat Shuva. So this is a Thursday night Parsha Shir. Please God, if this works, we're going to do this same time each week. And we're going to go through some ideas relating to the Parsha, and specifically this week, relating to Shabbat Shuva. With this in mind, I'm going to share my screen, and I hope you can see the presentation I prepared. And the title of the shiur is The Rope That Stretches from Heaven to Earth. And as we'll see, there's a hint to our Parsha in Parshat Ha'azinu to the idea of a rope. We're then going to explore what this means from a variety of different perspectives. So let's begin with Parshat Ha'azinu. And here we have in Perek Lamed Bet, Psukim Zayin till Tet, verses 7 till 9, Zachor yimot olam binu shnot dor vador, sha'al avicha v'yagetcha zekenecha v'yomu lach. We are told, remember the days of old, consider the years of ages past. Ask your father, he will inform you, your elders, they will tell you. V'anchel elyon goyim v'afrido, b'nei adam yatzev gvulot amim l'mispar b'nei Yisrael. When the Most High gave nations their homes and set the divisions of man, he fixed the boundaries of peoples in relation to Israel's numbers. But it's this third pasuk, pasuk tet, which most interests me. Ki chelek Hashem amo Yaakov chevel nachlato. The Lord's portion is his people, Yaakov, the share of his inheritance. The question is, what does this mean? Chevel nachlato, the rope of his inheritance. Well, Rashi offers a very beautiful insight. And he notes that by referring to Yaakov, who is a third of the patriarchs, this conjures up the image of having a three-cord rope. We are told here, Hu hashlishi be'avot. He is the third of the patriarchs. Hamshulash b'shalosh zchuyot, who has been endowed with three merits. Which merits? Zchut avi aviv, the merit of his grandfather Avram, Zchut aviv, and the merit of his father Yitzchak, zchuto, and his own merits. Yaakov is intertwined with the merits of his father and grandfather, and these three cords of merit create a chevel, a rope. Arei gimel kechevel hazeh shu asui begimel gdilim. And says Rashi, this is like a rope which is made up of three strands. And this means that Yaakov's children will inherit the land which has been promised to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Lo Yishmael ben Avram, v'lo Esav beno shel Yitzchak. Instead, it's the third generation, and it's the third generation who has heeded to the teachings of the prior two generations. So now we understand, according to Rashi, what is the meaning of Yaakov Chevel Nachlato. But let's take this idea a little bit deeper, and I want to turn to the Netziv in his Hamek Davar. Here, excuse for the fact there's no translation, but I'll translate the bits which are in white. Yaakov Chevel Nachlato, Jacob, the rope of his inheritance. Klal Omanim Shalal Chevel. Says in Netziv, the entire people of Israel are compared to being like a rope, which is made up of different cords, of different threads. And here he quotes the Sifri, which Rashi previously quoted, that Yaakov is a third of the patriarchs, and he's made up of the merit of his grandfather, his father, and himself. And then continues the Netziv, כמו חבל, אף שיש בו רבבות אלפי חוטים דקים, ולמעלה הם מפותלים יפה, ולמטה הם נפרדים, כל חוט בפני עצמו. And he says, ultimately, a rope isn't just made up of 3 threads, it's made up of many, many threads. And generally at the top, it's bound together, and at the bottom, it's frayed. He says, Kach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, U'Kiviyachol, Yitbarach Nishmata Dinishmatin. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ultimately the soul of all souls, the source of spirituality. V'chol Nishmot Yisrael Lemala Mekushrim Hema. And all the Jewish souls are bound up to God's soul. U'Lemata Kol Echad Neshama B'fnei Atzmo. But the bottom, just like each thread is frayed, so to each one of us is an individual soul. This is why we're called a Goy Echad, because we're united. There's this concept of Knesset Israel, of being one people, and yet at the same time, we are individuals. We have our separate threads. And so this image of being a cord, which is united at the top, which has its separate threads at the bottom, is according to the Netziv, an image which represents the Jewish people. This itself is stunning, and it really adds a further layer to the meaning that we saw of the Sifrei, quoted by Rashi. And the Pasuk itself, Yaakov Chevel Nachlato. Let's now try and make sense of this a little bit further. And here now we turn to the Nefesh HaChaim, to Rav Chaim of Volozhin. In fact, he says similar things in his Ruach Chaim commentary to Pirkei Avot, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. And here he says as follows: Ach inyan hu she'adam ha'shalem ka'ui ikarohu natua lemala b'shlosh nishmato elyona. The idea is that with a properly complete man, his essence is fixed in the supernal realms, in the supernal source of his soul. He continues, He then descends through thousands of myriads of worlds until its lower end enters into man's physical body in the lower realms. This, according to Rav Chaim of Volozhin, is the meaning of our pasuk from Parashat Ha'azinu. The Lord's portion of his people, Yaakov, the rope or the share of his inheritance. Meaning that his essence is tied and fixed in supernal realms, literally a part of God, so to speak. From which it descends like a dangling cord until it reaches a person's body. And all his earthly deeds to talk about an individual person, impact, and arouse the source of the supernal world, just as when one shakes a cord at its lower end, it sends a wave up the cord, which also shakes its upper end. What is a Nefesh HaChaim saying here? Rather than Netziv seeing the cord as representing the Jewish people, the Nefesh HaChaim says this cord represents each individual Jew, whose spiritual essence stems from the Almighty above and then descends below. And that we are connected. And we're so connected such that just if you take a rope and you shake it at the bottom, it impacts what goes on above. So too, what we do in this world impacts our upper world, our share in the world to come, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges us. So this is a profound, deep explanation of the pasuk, Yaakov Chevel Nachlato, that we are the Chevel. And as a number of commentaries point out, why is Yaakov here? We mentioned he's the third of the patriarchs, but also Yaakov had that dream of the Sulam, the ladder, which is rested on the ground and went heavenward. And so to Yaakov Chevel Nachlato is just another metaphor to describe this connection between this world and the next, which is achieved by each and every soul. Every single one of us have that chevel. Every single one of us are that chevel. We are connected to the Almighty. We reside on this earth. And our life shapes the above worlds just as much as the worlds above us inspire who we are, what we do. This comes from the Nefesh HaChaim. Interestingly, almost the same idea to the word is found in the Igot Tshuva of the Balatanya. Oftentimes people talk about the similarities and differences between the Nefesh HaChaim and the Tanya. Well, this is almost the same idea, or pretty much the same idea, based on the same pasuk. What does the Balatanya say? Bringing the godly soul down into this physical world to invest itself in a human body derives from the eternal aspect, the source of speech. This is a breath of the Supreme One that is indicated in the letter Hey. Right? Remember, we talked about how Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world Bihi Ba'am. Bihi Ba'am means that Kadosh Baruch Hu creates the world with the ease of the letter Hey. And here we're saying that the Hey is that breath that God used to create life, and it represents the life which is within our very being. And he goes on to tell us, this then is the meaning of the verse. The Lord's portion in his people, Yaakov, the rope, or the shev, his inheritance. The analogy of the rope, whose upper end is bound above and the lower end below, so too the upper end of the soul is bound above and its lower end is enclosed in the body. You can see it's the same idea that we saw with the Nefesh HaChaim here with the Balatanya, describing how Kadosh Baruch Hu, Kulo, not physical, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a non-physical being. And yet, God put God's spirit within each and every one of us. And so we become this rope between the spiritual world and the physical world because we're a blend of both. And this is what we learn from Ki Chelek Hashem Amo Yaakov Chevel Nachlato. We are that Chevel. So too, just like we saw with the Nefesh HaChaim, Chevel here represents each and every one of us. Now, this is all very well and good. This is lovely. It's nice to talk about what is our soul. It's nice to explore the blend and the bridge between the body and soul, and how really we try and reach heavenward whilst we are here on earth, and how we are really on that ladder, and that rope is just another way of describing this concept. But this Shabbos is Shabbat Shuva. So we have a neshama, we have a soul. What do we do with it? Right? What's our task? What's our mission? Well, on Yom Kippur, we read Sefer Yonah. And in Sefer Yonah, a profound thing happened. We know Yonah is commanded by God to go to Tarshish. And, Yonah is commanded by Kodesh Baruch Hu to tell the people of Nineveh to do tshuva. Instead, he flees to Tarshish and he tries to hide on a boat. I mean, he goes on a boat, and then there's a storm and there's a great whole tumult. And what does he do? He's found sleeping at the bottom of the boat. And here we're reading the Psukim, Gimel Dalet Hey Vav. We come to Pasuk Vav. What happens? V'kav elav Rav HaChovel. Rav HaChovel, we generally translate as a captain. Why is a captain of a boat called Rav HaChovel? Don't forget we use the word chevel before rope, because generally the captain of a boat's a guy who ties the ropes and makes sure that everything gets done. He's a person in charge of making sure the boat gets to the right direction. V'kav elav Rav HaChovel, v'yomer lo malach hanirdam. Kum k'ran elokecha, ulai he says, maybe your God will be kind to us who will not perish. Of course, these words, Malach HaNirdam, are used in the Selichot. We invoke these words of this captain to tell us to wake up. Just like Rambam says that the shofar is there to stir us up, to wake us up, Uru, Uru. So the Rav HaChovel comes along and he says, Malach HaNirdam, why are you sleeping? Wake up. Now, what is this about? Well, of course, this is just a story of Yonah and him physically waking it up. But according to the Zohar, the waking up is something altogether different. And the Zohar, in fact, makes a connection between our pasuk in Parshat Ha'azinu and what takes place here in Sefer Yonah. Since man is seized by that storm, he's not talking about physical storm, seized by a storm that takes place in terms of our battle of doing the right thing. What happens? Lies in his sickbed is written, Yonah went down to the recess of the ship, he lays down and fell asleep. Though man is lying down sick, the soul does not waken to repent before its master, to redeem its sins. What happens? What's written here? The captain comes along. Man Rava Chovel Asazar. Who is this shipmaster? Who is this captain? The Yetzer Tov, the Imari Kula. That's the Yetzer Tov that guides everyone. What are you sleeping? Get up and call out to your creator. It's not time to go to sleep. Because you're being brought to judgment before you be done in this world. Repent for your offense. Wow. What you have here is a teaching of the Zohar explaining Sefer Yonah and telling us the Rava Chovel isn't just a person talking to Yonah, but instead it's our Yetzer Tov waking us up, telling us to do tshuva. Malacha nirdam. For 1 second, that Rava Chovel is connected to the Chever Yaakov Nachal. It's connected to our neshama. When we talk about the Yetzer Tov, what is it? It's our voice from within, stirring us, waking us up to do good. It's our neshama telling us to do tshuva. Within each and every one of us, we have a Rava Chovel. And that Rava Chovel is part of that chevel which is what God put within us, and which stays connected to God, which reminds us of what we can be, and it reminds us of what we can do, and it reminds us of how we can invest efforts and do tshuva. And says here the Zohar, our task is to wake up. Our task is to wake up, to cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not the time to sleep. We're being brought to judgment. That's Yom Adin. That's what we just had in Rosh Hashanah. And our task now is to repent for our offenses. And as we approach Yom Kippur, when we read this story, and we hear about the Rava Chovel, we realize within every single one of us, we have a Rava Chovel. Let's now just see what the Vilna Gaon says. You may well know that the Vilna Gaon interprets the whole of Sefer Yonah, a little like the spirit that we just saw in the Zohar, explaining that it's a journey of the neshama. Sefer Yonah isn't a story of a person, it's a story of our neshama, and how it runs away from doing what it needs to do, and how Kadosh Baruch Hu calls it back. Says the Vilna Gaon, who is the Rava Chovel? We said before it's our Yetzer Tov. Here the Vilna Gaon describes it as being our heart. It means really our heart, not just a physical heart, but our neshama calling on us, beckoning us to make changes. And he continues, because you can fix the neshama. Sometimes you can't fix a body. But the neshama you can fix. And that's what the Rava Chovel comes along to teach us. That Rava Chovel within each and every one of us. And neshama efshar letaken. He calls out to us. Ma lecha nirda. It tells us that we have zchuyot. We have zchuyot from ourselves. We have zchuyot from our matriarchs and our patriarchs. That Kodesh Baruch Hu believes in us. That however far we think we are from heaven, there's a rope and there's a ladder connecting us to heaven. And if we turn our hearts, we listen to our Yetzar Tov, if we do tshuva, then we can do justice to our neshama. Then we can honor that gift of God within every single one of us. So let's just review. We'll go back and then we'll close. We began by talking about the rope that stretches from heaven to earth. We mentioned the pasuk in Parashat Hazinu, Yaakov Chevel Nachlato. You'll remember Rashi, who talks about this three-stranded rope, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, each with their zchuyot, which makes Yaakov Chevel Nachlato strong. And then we were told that the idea of a rope really represents Am Yisrael, together at the top, which is the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and at the bottom, all these many different strands, which is every single one of us. We saw how Rav Chaim of Volozhin said, yes, that Chevel is you and it's me. That Chevel is connected to heaven and it hangs down here on earth. And if you move it on earth, its pulse reaches heaven for good and for bad. But we are that Chevel. The same thing we saw with the Gerta Tshuva or the Balatanya. Kadosh Baruch Hu creates us with a hey. Kadosh Baruch Hu wishes us to remember that we have a piece of God within us. We are connected to heaven. We are heavenly beings and we are physical beings. We should never forget it. And we said, so what's its connection with Yonah? We mentioned Sefer Yonah and how we read it in Yom Kippur. We mentioned V'yikav chovel lashon chevel. Malachan Yodam tells us to wake up, says the Zohar. That's a Yetzar Tov within us. Yetzar Tov, which is never forgotten that it's tied to heaven. And continued and concludes the Vilna Gaon. The Rav Chovel is our heart. It's our heart that knows that we can do more, that we can be better. And if we look a little bit higher and raise ourselves a little higher in the rungs, not just of that ladder, but push ourselves up that rope, we're going to have Kirvat Elokim, we're going to have closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what we should aspire for. And that's what Tshuva is. Tshuva means return. It means taking ourselves with that rope and rising a little bit higher. And why? Why should we do this? Because we can fix the neshama. We should remember that. Because that is what Tshuva is. So this is the first of my Facebook Lives. I hope you've enjoyed this shiur. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom. I wish you a Gemar Chatima Tova. And I wish you a Tzom Mo'il. You should look after yourselves. And anybody who would like the sources that I've just shared, please be in contact. I'll be glad to share them with you. Be well and take care.